Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for organizing this very interesting symposium. Sometimes it's really nice to look back to what we have as a collective done for the last years and to analyze it together. So the project which I will present today is called Digital Totem, and it was the last scenography for the Head Fashion Défilé, for the fashion show in Head. The project is quite small in terms of scale, and therefore I would like to put the project into the context and the pretext of the projects which we as a department of, I will not say these words, have been doing for the Department of Fashion. So as you know, in Head is very known for the fashion department, especially in the recent years. But maybe what you don't know, if you have never participated, that the event itself is a super important event in the fashion all around the world. Here I haven't found pictures with the later building, but usually, you can believe me, there's a huge line in front of the building during the evening. The line goes through the whole park hench, and it's quite an important event. And basically, there was a decision to collaborate between the departments, between the fashion department and our department. And we have been invited, together with the students, of course, to rethink and to think about the scenography of the fashion show. It takes place here, exactly here, but the space transforms completely and becomes a completely different space during the event. You can imagine there's 2,000 people, or at least before COVID, it was usually 2,000 people who were coming here. So you can imagine just the amount of people is already transforming the space a lot. But then, starting the semester, we decided with students to analyze, like, why is this thing so important, especially for scenography? And here you see some facts. Basically, it takes 1 year, sometimes even more, to prepare. It takes around 1 month to construct it, 1 week to deconstruct it. In total, event is 1 hour, but then actually parade, the défilé, is only 30 minutes. The budget is quite big. It's around this number. It, of course, depends on different years. It depends on the partners, but basically you can understand it's a budget which goes not in scenography, of course. It goes into work of, as you see, around 100 people, which I'm speaking about: regisseurs, architects, scenographs, models, photographers, video makers, catering people, and so on. Very many visitors, and people who watch it online is around 10,000. But you see that the amount of time and energy invested for 30 minutes of the actual show is huge. And basically, the shows used to pass in a very traditional manner. There was always a public, and there was the défilé itself, the parade itself, sometimes with a kind of slightly different scenography, but most of the time the architecture was not playing a big role. So I think that the time when Head started to rethink the scenography came when the collaboration with our department started. And basically, the first studio, we called it Palace for an Hour, exactly for the reason which I just explained you. So basically, if you think about all of this, you're basically doing something which is very, very grand, but for just 1 hour. Palace, of course, not in terms of aesthetics, but in terms of the amount of invested resources. So we did the research, and because we were completely far away, at least me, from the world of fashion, so we decided to understand the basics, how the fashion shows work, and what are the things which we can think about or rethink about. So it was, of course, the path, and the students analyzed many different fashion shows in terms of the way how the models move in space. It was the history of clothing. It was the relationship to human body. It was the relationship to location, because many fashion shows, they profit from completely crazy locations like lavender fields, train rooftops, skyscrapers, beaches, and so on. In Head, it was not the case, but still the urban aspect is important. The relationship to audience, and basically the perception of the audience in the fashion show. And of course, the materials, which usually should be temporary, unless we're speaking about maybe some old shows by Karl Lagerfeld, where he invested millions of francs into doing something very ephemeral. But nowadays, with the question of when we realize that we cannot endlessly use resources, that becomes also a very important topic. Of course, the light, like in any scenography, and so on. So together with students, we have worked a semester on research and then on several projects. We had very nice critiques. You can see some of our colleagues here criticizing some of the projects, and Bertrand Van Dorp, which was at the moment my assistant, and who is a very crucial person also for the development of all these projects. And students proposed quite nice, interesting ideas, which I will not go into details. They were projects like rethinking the campus of the head, making literally a palace for an hour, making dunes in the cube. So basically many different, transforming the cube into pool, into colosseum, into like artificial garden and so on. But finally, the project which was chosen for this year was quite a simple and modest, but very symbolic for Genève project of this plongeoir of poesy. It was basically a very direct scenographical moment, and so one student, he proposed this metaphor, which I think was very adored by the school, that students, the fashion students, they kind of jump into the unknown lake of the professional world, and he proposed a very theatrical and very simple project. And of course, there was an idea that, as you know, in the historical Bande de Paquis, there is these boxes where people dress and undress. So it had also a relationship to the human body and to the moment of dressing. And finally, this project was realized. It looked like this. It was a very, let's say, spectacular show. And I'm scrolling so much because this is not the project which is the kind of the main part of today's lecture, but it's just the pretext. But what's important in this project was that despite it was quite a big success as a scenography, we ourselves felt that there's still something to improve. So first, we didn't think that there was a big let's say, rethinking of the whole idea of fashion show. It was still classical, let's say, conventional idea of linear movement of the models. And second was, of course, the question to the resources, because the scenography, nevertheless, it was not such a big project, but still it was not thought of its future afterlife. But as you can see, there were lots of people, which is important because right after COVID started, and that was the moment when basically together with the school, we started rethinking what is a fashion show and how does it need to function. So basically the next year, or even maybe 2 years, I already forgot, but fashion show was canceled, which was very big. I mean, of course, it was not the main problem in these years, but of course for the fashion department it was a very big personal disappointment. And after the first one was cancelled, we were asked, okay, let's rethink the fashion show. Can we actually do it second year, but differently? Maybe we can rethink the format. And then we started to think that because the idea was the presence of so many people in one room, let's do it like an exhibition, and we have proposed a 2 or 3 day long, together of course with the fashion department, a 2 or 3 day long show where people, there's not show per se, there's just clothes which are exhibited in this huge space, and people just come, look at them and so on. But of course there was a movement, because the problem was the models couldn't of course stay in one place for 3 days, but the movement was involved. So basically, and as you see, it's a draft, it was a not realized project. It was a huge, basically, machinery of moving and rotating circles, which could allow to show the collections of the fashion show in movement. And also you can see one lonely guy. So we were thinking there would be 50 people in this space, which would be relatively okay for the show. Unfortunately, still, because as you remember, COVID was coming in waves, and the waves were repeating and getting even worse. Even this kind of safe option was still not realized due to many reasons, but particularly COVID. And now we come to the project in question, to the digital totem, which happened, I think, right after the COVID pandemic went a bit down. And was the first after pandemic fashion show. And after we started reflecting what has changed, so the first thing of which we realized that during these years, we all felt the digital shift, and the digital shift happened in our work and our presence in space. It became kind of almost a cliche that even for the type of audience which was before not used to digital presence and absence in space. It was important, and you represented this project, I guess, today. It became also a topic in the department, and this image of presence of kind of digital avatar in the same space as the physical avatar became quite an important point of discussion. I mean, I think now, after several years, we already taken it as granted, but I think back then it was kind of the realization, oh wow, people can be digital, people can be real. So back then it was quite a new feeling. And we also started to rethink the path and the audience, thinking that this kind of linear movement is a bit, it has to be rethought. Maybe not in the most radical way, because still we have the limitations of this space, but we have to rethink it. We have to show that it's not the same fashion show which was before. And basically it was decided to put the fashion show kind of in the center of the cube to make it much more compact. You know, like when, like in stadiums, the more steep and the more compact the stadiums, the more you feel the atmosphere. And put it in the center. And also one of the topics which we were speaking about when doing the research was the fashion paradoxes and the cult of fashion and the cult of something, let's say, not always very valuable or sometimes very ephemeral. So here it was a page from one of the students' research who basically compared the things which were let's say, not having a value until they were, let's say, acknowledged by fashion, and then they immediately became super either iconic or super expensive. And basically this metaphor came to the logic of a totem, and the totem is a spirit being, a sacred object, or a symbol that serves as an emblem for a group of people, such as a family, clan, lineage, or tribe. And we felt very much in common with this notion, because we felt that this fashion show is something very, very important for the fashion people, but then there is a certain cult and there is a certain, let's say, hermeticity of fashion design. And we thought that the totem and the digital totem could be really an important symbol of the space. So this is the construction process, and you can see, even you don't see yet the scenography, but the idea was putting something in center, putting something very symbolical, and then let the models pass in three directions much freely around. So the structure which was created was quite simple. This is the design. So in the design, it looks very, very, very elementary. It was a dismountable temporary structures with lots of screens. But the main things which form the concept of this project is the presence of digital, let's say, avatars of people, the totem of fashion, something which has to do with the body and with some kind of primitive understanding of fashion, and the audience. So these four things, they kind of formed the concept, and that was the proposed project. Here it was just a 3D rendering, and then we started thinking how to do it. And for us, in our practice, it's very important to always reference to temporary textures, which is basically, we made even a big research about it, about the smartness of temporary architecture. So speaking back about the resources, we decided to do it completely built for disassembly, and that this project would not leave completely any trace afterwards the fashion show is finished. And so finally the project, and here you can see all the elements at once. You can see the public, you can see the models, so the bodies, two types of bodies in space. And then there was a kind of an ephemeral construction of this totem with multiple digital screens, which presented both here, maybe it's more visible, the overall structure, which presented here they're purposefully white, but during the show they presented either people and parts of their body, details, and some information about the students. And in addition to this structure, to kind of mark its kind of physical presence and this kind of primitive energy, 3 rocks from Salev mountain, very, very heavy rocks, were brought to stabilize the structure and to counterposition with the kind of the image of the futuristic flickering screens. And here some images, some details of the aluminum structure with the screens, the rocks which were placed in head, and also the way how the screens functioned, not only for the bodies or faces, but also to give some information about the students. And here you can see the presence of it. Just I actually didn't how to expect it, but this image somehow became this image of the, let's say, human with like in digital image of the human, despite that Jean-Pierre Graff was in the room. but actually maybe because it was the most stable image, not moving in the photography later, this became kind of as if he was speaking from somewhere far away. Yeah, and this is it. And thank you very much for your attention.